Hello artists and art enthusiasts, this is Brandon Stewart with AttrimentStudios.com. So today we're going to be drawing this with a Kneaded eraser, the Palomino Blackwing 602 pencil, and my little shaver pencil sharpener. And I'll be doing all of this on Stillman Birn Zeta series paper. Alright, let's begin. In this video, I'll be using an abridged version of the drawing exercise called the Blockin. I say abridged because in this drawing I will be going through the steps very quickly. So essentially the Blockin is a way for you to break down your object, the thing that you're drawing, into first simple, then more complex shapes. So I start this drawing by creating what's called an envelope. That's the first step of the Blockin, which basically what I'm doing is I'm creating an area for my drawing to take place. The second step of the Blockin is breaking down the envelope. In this step, I am finding relationships between the elements within the object itself. For example, the bottom of the nose cavity lines up with the cheekbone. It also helps to look at the negative space of the object that you're drawing. Looking at the negative space can oftentimes reveal more subshapes within the positive space. The Blockin part of any drawing, and I cannot stress this enough, should be done lightly. Those lines are not necessary. They are guides for all the shading. So at this stage of our drawing, we are in the third step. So this is called the early Blockin. We're still making relationships between shapes. We're still seeing what lines connect with other lines and things of that nature. Personally, I believe this is the most important step in the Blockin process. This is where you will make sure all of your proportions are correct. So that way when the shading begins, all of your elements will be in their proper places. Naturally, simple adjustments will occur throughout the process, but you wouldn't want to have to move, for example, the skull's eye socket when you're about to finish your drawing. I've got to be honest, this step can be frustrating. As you narrow your scope on all the emerging shapes, you'll have to move and adjust elements so that they are in their proper places. But the payoff here is that your drawing will really have emerged by now. Periodically, make sure to stop and erase those unnecessary guidelines. They can make your drawing super hectic and confusing. On the final step of the Blockin, I'll be continuing to tighten up my line work in preparation to start adding the shading. I have split the skull in two sections, so that way you'll actually get to see the Blockin process done twice. The second half of the skull is a more true Blockin process since I got a little noodly and overzealous on the first side. As I'm sketching the other half, see if you can tell which Blockin step I'm doing as I'm doing it. And yes, I know, I cheated a little bit by skipping over to the one side before I finished the first side. That's my fault. So with the left side of the drawing blocked in, I moved over to the right side and started the Blockin process over again. Some people do their whole drawing in one step, but in the case of the skull, which is not symmetrical, I decided to break it down in two halves. For me, it's just easier to look at the skull in two pieces, then put it together rather than as a whole. Obviously, you can do what is best for you, and certainly whatever you're drawing is going to dictate how you approach it. Alright, with our Blockin done, let's move on to some shading. When it comes to this part of the drawing, I really am an advocate of the slow building up process. I really think that the drawing will have more depth if you take your time and build up your values a little as you go. Don't just try to cram a bunch of dark in immediately. Layer by layer is the ticket. I get asked a lot why I don't use a blending stump or why I don't suggest people use a blending stump, and my simple answer to that is because a blending stump really makes it easy to muddy up your drawing. I think especially for the beginning artist, someone who's just learning, it's better to learn the process of building up your values a little at a time, layer by layer. But I have to confess, every now and then I do use a smudge method to create big areas of dark, or I'll do backgrounds and then I'll pull the highlights out with a kneaded eraser. But that is a totally different process, and I'll actually be doing that in another video. As you're drawing, another important thing to consider is to observe your model. So whatever it is you're drawing, always stop and take a second to look up at that. Don't get sucked into your drawing. Once you get sucked into your drawing, you're not seeing the object for what it is. Like an old professor used to say to me, drawing really is seeing. And the better observation skills you have, the better drawings you'll be able to do. So as I get closer to finishing this drawing, what I'm doing is I'm going back and popping in some highlights and darkening all the darker areas and popping in some of those little nuances and subtleties that make the skull have the texture that it does. This is really the funnest part. It's tedious, but it's really where the object you're drawing starts to pop out the most. So with that, I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and happy drawing.